Hello friends, my name is JJ, and it is once again time for the annual video in which we talk about all of the things from the past year that I think are likely to earn a permanent spot in the American cultural canon. The American cultural canon being the collection of people, events, objects, and knowledge that make up the most influential culture in the entire world. In any given year, there is always a bunch of new stuff that captures our collective attention, but much of it is forgotten pretty quickly. Our challenge is thus to identify the things that emerged in 2023 that are also likely to be talked about or referenced in 2033 and 2043 and beyond. So let's get to it. But before we begin, let us just hear a quick word from today's video sponsor, Incogni. Hello friends. So if you are anything like me, you once lived a miserable life in which your email inbox was constantly overflowing with spam, and you were being endlessly harassed at all hours of the day and night by mysterious robocalls from China. Why is all of this happening to me? You may have found yourself crying. What did I ever do to deserve this? Well, in most cases, the answer is nothing particularly unusual. We are constantly submitting personal data online without thinking twice about it, typing in our email addresses and phone numbers to any site that asks for it as part of the routine business of signing up for a new user account or buying something from an online shop. The problem is that a bunch of these websites then wind up selling this information to all sorts of randos, and before you know it, you're getting buried under a sea of petty annoyances. Luckily, Incogni is here to save the day. Under the laws of most Western nations, any company that collects personal data is legally obligated to delete that data if the person in question requests it. But making those kind of requests is a big hassle, and this is where Incogni comes in. So check this out. Here is my Incogni account, and you can see all of the various companies that have my data, and Incogni automatically sends deletion requests to all of them. And though it can take a while, you can see that some of them, like say Book Your Data, have received the request and have agreed to stop collecting, trading, or storing personal info on me. This is a very useful service to have in the digital age, and luckily Incogni has a special deal for fans of this channel. If you sign up using the link in the thing below and the promo code JJMCC, you can get an amazing 60% off an annual plan. So don't just passively resign yourself to the terror of unsolicited emails and phone calls. Take control of your digital life and give Incogni a try today. So the first big 2023 thing that I think will withstand the test of time consists of 3 letters, GLP, which stands for glucagon-like peptides. If that doesn't ring any bells, perhaps you might recognize the most popular brand of GLP, Ozempic. GLPs are the revolutionary new anti-obesity drugs that gained a lot of attention this past year and received a ton of positive media coverage.
A full-scale national trend.
Diet drugs have of course been historically regarded as the quackiest of quack science, but today all of the big science people insist that GLPs are different and even revolutionary in terms of what a game changer they are. I am not much of a science man myself, but from what I understand, GLPs help regulate your blood sugar levels in a way that makes you less hungry, with the weight loss in turn coming from how this changes your behavior rather than something the drug does to the food already inside your body. Given how positive the results have been and how widely they've been accepted as credible and typical, a lot of the reporting has suggested that the mainstreaming of GLPs might represent a critical turning point in the war on obesity, which would be enormously consequential from both a medical and cultural perspective. Some have observed that the creation of a miracle weight loss drug is actually coming at a rather awkward time in American cultural history, just given that a lot of effort has been exerted over the last decade or so to change our dominant social attitude towards being overweight. We've seen a rise in concepts like body positivity or health at any size, and the growing stigmatization of so-called fat shaming as a form of prejudice. While much of this has been motivated by genuine compassion, a lot of it was also based on growing cynicism towards the efficacy of American diet and fitness culture. You know, this idea that a lot of the stuff we've been told helps you get thin isn't actually supported by science or statistical proof, and that the condition of being overweight is actually actually a lot less under anyone's individual control than we've previously assumed. So it's interesting to contemplate the possibility that the rise of drugs like Ozempic could now make the pendulum swing back the other way, with being fat being re-stigmatized because, don't you know we have a drug for that now? Okay, so here's another important three-letter acronym from 2023. SBF. Sam Bankman-Fried was the head of a major cryptocurrency investment company, and over the course of the last few years, he earned a great deal of favorable press for supposedly being a lot more intelligent and responsible than the other crypto bros. But then this year he was arrested, tried, and found guilty on 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy, and will now almost certainly wind up in the canon of the great American scam artists, alongside Bernie Madoff, Charles Keating, and of course, Carlo Ponzi. Cryptocurrency investing has always been regarded with quite a bit of skepticism from the public, so we can't really frame SBF's downfall as like the moment crypto lost its innocence or anything, but it also certainly does not help push the narrative in the opposite direction. Speaking of criminal prosecutions, we can't forget this guy. Donald Trump had a year of legal peril without precedent in American history, becoming the first president ever indicted on criminal charges, let alone 91 separate felonies in both state and federal court. While it is still too early to know what the ultimate outcome of his various trials will be, images of his arrest and prosecution are almost certainly destined to be some of the most famous pictures of any president in American history, just given the significance of what they depict. Now, not everything that has a lasting impact on American culture happens in America. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for instance, has long been a subject of deep interest to Americans, and I discussed some of the reasons why in a recent video. But in the aftermath of the Hamas terrorist attacks of October 7th, and Israel's subsequent invasion of the Gaza Strip, American interest in the conflict ratcheted to unprecedented highs, largely because the violence was itself unprecedented. As the worst fighting in decades between the two sides exploded, American supporters of both Israelis and Palestinians had their loyalties tested like never before, with much of the American rhetoric around the conflict becoming more shrill and strident than ever. Left-wing support for the Palestinian cause became particularly flamboyant, with labor unions, student groups, and social media personalities really amping up their anti-Israel rhetoric to new heights. Progressive Americans have always leaned more pro-Palestinian, but now it feels like that issue has been irreversibly incorporated into American leftist culture, especially among the youth, in a way that could have long-term consequences for US foreign policy. No one interested in American politics can get away with not having an opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And after 2023, no one with an opinion on the conflict is going to be able to get away without having an opinion on October 7th and the war that followed. On a more chill note, I would say that 2023 was the year that the notion of a clear and identifiable 2020s aesthetic started to really come into the fore. And to explain precisely what that aesthetic is, I thought I would turn things over to my YouTuber pal Linus Bowman, who runs an awesome channel all about design stuff.
Thanks, JJ. Making predictions is always a risk, but here are 3 graphic design trends that feel pretty strongly like parts of the mainstream 2020s aesthetic, without speculating on what's going to happen with generative AI. First, fun organic typography. We saw a real push towards minimalism in the 2010s. Even oversimplified logos became a meme. Some called it reblanding, and basic sans serif typefaces dominated. Now the pendulum has swung the other way towards more quirky, organic, even Art Nouveau-inspired typefaces, especially for consumer brands in food, beverage, and beauty. This example mixes a quirky retro logo, minimalist illustration, and brutalist typography pushed into 4 corners, which is very 2020s. Number 2 is the bento box layout, something that Apple has popularized. This bled over from UI design into marketing. Just as the IMAX translucent, shiny plastic and the aqua design language became synonymous with the 2000s, I think in 10 years we'll look back and see the bento box as extremely 2020s. And my third pick is the end of flat design. I wouldn't go so far as to say skeuomorphism is back. It's less about imitating physical objects, but stylized 3D is very on trend and makes sense for AR and VR. Rich lighting, texture, and shape makes things feel more tangible. This ties together with the broader trend of moving away from the austere minimalism of the last decade towards something a bit more human-centric and comfy in the 2020s. Back to you, JJ.
Thank you, Linus. And speaking of aesthetics, how about the Sphere? This is the 2.3 billion, 366 feet tall, LED-covered orb thing that the city of Las Vegas unveiled in September. It immediately went viral for its sheer weirdness, especially when in happy face or eyeball mode. It's been a while since there's been something added to the American monument canon in terms of some giant physical thing capable of becoming a global symbol of the US. Though there's been no shortage of impressive new buildings in recent years, even the coolest skyscraper is kind of easy to ignore these days, just given how common high-quality architecture is now. But the Sphere is different. It's so audacious and bizarre, and I think that's why it's going to loom large in the American cultural imagination for a long time to come. So 2023 was also a pretty consequential year for Hollywood. The summer saw the major studios crippled by the largest writers and actors strike in 60 years, which delayed the release of new entertainment for almost 4 months. One of the strike's big instigating factors was growing anger at the way that writers and actors have been compensated in the era of digital streaming, which has proven to be a much less transparent and lucrative regime than the old residual system used in the TV era. The Hollywood workers have now agreed to a new system, which I'm sure will be very consequential, but it could be a while before we know exactly how. One thing the strike did contribute to, however, was the tremendous success of Barbie and Oppenheimer, two big blockbusters that were released just prior to the strike and stayed in theaters for quite a long time. Both films broke all sorts of records, and as such are two of the most recent entrants into the cultural canon of American mega-hit movies, with Barbie in particular now the 11th most successful American film of all time. The films are also notable for not being connected to any larger cinematic franchise, which is unusual for hit movies these days. Decades from now, they might still be remembered as standalone masterpieces, while, say, the MCU movies might just be remembered as a big indistinguishable mush. On that note, 2023 also saw a lot of box office flops for Disney, which prompted a lot of commentary about how their superhero and sequel-based business model might finally be starting to exhaust audiences. If those criticisms are taken seriously, perhaps we will see 2023 as an important inflection point in the evolution of American cinema overall. I'll tell you a 2023 entertainment thing that did nothing for me, however. The rise of those vapid guy-girl chat show type things. I don't even know what you call them. I know the big one is Fresh and Fit, but a bunch of other ones have been popping up everywhere as well lately. Often they take the form of having some right-wing guy yell at a bunch of babes, and all they talk about is sex and gender roles and stuff like that. This is actually a very old format of talk show that has been around since at least the 1980s, proving that there isn't much new under the sun. But I feel like 2023 has really seen a conscious revival of this format, which has in turn helped raise the profile of a bunch of weird pseudo-celebrities who seem to exist entirely to go on these shows and argue about sex. Raunchy and controversial talk shows proved very popular in the past, and I suspect 2023 might wind up heralding the dawn of a new, well, I don't want to say golden age, but certainly an age of them as a cultural force. Elon Musk officially took control of Twitter in October of 2022, but I didn't talk about it in last year's video because I thought it was still too early to tell what the consequences would be. This year, I think it became pretty clear what the consequences have been, and a lot of that involved a dramatic shift in the popular perception of exactly what kind of website Twitter, or excuse me, X is, and who it's for. And nowhere was this shift more evident than in the dramatic redefinition of what it meant to be a blue checkmark user. In pre-Elon Twitter, to be a blue checkmark was to be a member of the American A-list in some form, to be certified as mattering enough to deserve a special signifier for the benefit of the public. This inevitably fostered cries of elitism, with many conservative commentators using blue checkmark as a kind of slur to describe a member of the condescending progressive establishment running the media and the universities and all of that.
America deserves a president who sides with the blue-collar workers who pay his salary, not the blue checkmarks on Twitter.
In 2023, Elon upended that regime, stripping away all blue checkmarks from users and allowing anyone who wanted one going forward to just buy one for themselves. And because Elon himself is increasingly this sort of right-wing character, participating in this new system became seen as a political signifier of a different sort, with progressives now dismissing blue checkmarks as conservative troglodytes.
I was on Twitter and I saw the teaser trailer for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which has like a pregnant woman Spider-Man, and all the comments are just like a bunch of blue check freaks getting crazy.
Twitter becoming right-wing coded had other consequences in 2023 as well, particularly the growing desire to make a competitor to it, though it remains too early to tell how that is going to play out. But a major brand changing its whole vibe overnight is still a pretty weird phenomenon, eh? It's like a tech version of the infamous party switch. Can you think of another cultural thing that changed its identity so fundamentally? Well, maybe the next thing actually, which is the Fall of Dilbert. For the last 30 years, Dilbert has been one of the major players in the American newspaper comic strip canon, alongside Peanuts, Garfield, and Calvin and Hobbes, and was certainly one of the most aggressively merchandised. The creator, Scott Adams, has always been a fairly eccentric and contrarian guy with political views that have been hard to place. But in recent years, he has drifted more openly to the right, particularly the sort of crankish and conspiratorial MAGA far right. And it all climaxed earlier this year when he did a live stream talking about why he fears and distrusts black people.
And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population.
This triggered severe blowback, with pretty much every newspaper in America immediately dropping his comic strip, and all of his contracts with book publishers and toy makers getting torn up as well. Now, no one ever gets completely cancelled in America, of course, and Adams will probably be able to maintain some sort of brand as a right-wing pundit. But I think it's fair to say that Dilbert's standing as a mainstream, respectable comic is almost certainly gone forever now, making it a rare example of something that there is going to be a lot of pressure to remove from the American cultural canon. All right, and now let us do a couple of quick honorable mentions. Taylor Swift was, of course, Time Magazine's 2023 Person of the Year, and her Eras Tour, which is still ongoing, is already the most successful musical tour of all time, making over $1 billion so far. But Taylor has been a big pop star for a while now, and I don't think that the amount of attention and acclaim she earned this year has really done much beyond confirm a canonical status she has held since at least 2008 or so. Congressman George Santos certainly had an enormous media profile this year after it was revealed that much of his official biography was fraudulent and he's been living all of these fake lives under fake identities over the years. The House voted to expel him earlier this month. The problem, though, is that the US House of Representatives is really big, with members that only serve 2-year terms. So in any given year, the likelihood that at least one complete freak will be in the chamber is relatively high. The fact that Santos was only the 6th ever congressman to be booted from the House by a vote of his peers is interesting as a point of trivia, but it's not like Henry Cornelius Burnett or Ozzie Myers are exactly household names. I think the same principle applies when we consider America's tumultuous year of 4 speakers. Kevin McCarthy took over as Speaker from Nancy Pelosi in January after an incredibly narrow election, but then he lost power in a non-confidence vote a couple months later, making him the shortest serving speaker ever, unless you count acting Speaker Patrick McHenry, who served for a month before Mike Johnson was elected. McCarthy's fall was dramatic and even darkly hilarious, but will it be remembered, even as a political meme? My sense is probably not, just because I'm not convinced that Speakers of the House are something that Americans care enough about to make an obscure one any sort of permanent cultural reference point. An obscure president, maybe? William Henry Harrison is certainly vastly better known than Michael C. Kerr. So yes, that is my pick for the bundle of things that were added to the American cultural canon this year. As usual, I am keen to hear any additions to the list that you guys might have, and I'm sure you have a bunch because it feels like this was a pretty packed year, culturally speaking. Anyway, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next week.